Welcome to Truthsful Crime Case, where we explore some of the most disturbing and heartbreaking crimes in America. Today we head to Boulder, Colorado, a town famous for its scenic landscapes and progressive values. However, in June 2017, this peaceful community became the scene of a devastating murder that forever changed the lives of those connected to it. This is the tale of a complicated love affair that led to a shocking murder. Meet Paul Barstow, a 36-year-old from Boulder, Colorado, who seemed to have it all together, balancing both his career and personal life with ease. Paul worked as a software engineer, earning great respect for his expertise and dependability. He was passionate about his work and often talked about his dream project, a revolutionary app called Lemon, inspired by a trailblazing female writer, aimed at transforming how people connected with technology on a deeper, more intimate level. Outside of work, Paul embraced his creative side as an artist. Paul had a passion for painting landscapes, often drawing inspiration from the breathtaking views of Boulder, set against the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains. He was also a dedicated father to his 2 young children from a previous marriage. Despite the demands of single parenthood, he always made sure to prioritize time with them. Paul's friends described him as calm, thoughtful, and reliable. He was someone who found solace in routine, appreciating the stability of his everyday life. However, in the days before his death, while everything appeared normal on the outside, those close to him noticed signs of growing distress. Paul's relationship with his sister-in-law, Angelica Barstow, had always been complicated. 5 years earlier, they began a secret affair, which provided him an escape from the stresses of his life, but also weighed heavily on his conscience. What troubled Paul even more was how close Angelica remained to her husband, Jason, Paul's younger brother, adding another layer of guilt and tension to the affair. Paul had been eagerly anticipating a weekend getaway with his children. He had rented a cabin near Estes Park, hoping for a peaceful escape from the complexities of his personal life. He mentioned plans to visit the Stanley Hotel, known for inspiring Stephen King's The Shining, and possibly taking his kids on a ghost tour to make the trip even more memorable. But Paul would never make it to that trip. His life, full of aspirations and a deep appreciation for nature, was about to be cut short in a devastating way. On the evening of June 5, 2017, Boulder was peaceful, with a gentle breeze sweeping through the trees, unaware of the tragedy that was about to unfold. As the city settled into the warmth of summer, most residents were unwinding in their homes. Around 10:30 p.m., Jason Barstow, Paul's younger brother, arrived at Paul's house, concerned. He had been trying to get in touch with Paul throughout the day, but his calls and texts had gone unanswered for several days, fueling his worry. Jason, typically laid back, initially assumed his brother might be out hiking or preoccupied with the kids. However, as the hours went by and Paul remained unresponsive, his concern grew. When he arrived at Paul's house, he noticed the front door slightly ajar, a surprising sight, given Paul's usual attention to home security. Jason hesitated briefly before pushing the door open and stepping inside. The house was unnervingly quiet, with only the ticking of a wall clock breaking the silence. He called out for Paul, but his voice echoed unanswered through the stillness. As Jason ventured further into the house, he saw signs of a struggle in the living room: an overturned chair, scattered papers, and a coffee mug shattered on the floor. His heart pounded as he hurried toward the bedroom. In the bedroom, Jason found Paul's lifeless body on the floor near the bed. Paul's face was pale, and a length of rope was tightly wound around his neck. The horrifying sight left Jason frozen, unable to fully grasp the reality of what he was witnessing. For a few moments, Jason stood in shock, struggling to comprehend the scene before him. His once vibrant brother now lay motionless. After what seemed like an eternity, Jason managed to pull out his phone and dial 911. His voice shook as he explained to the operator what he had discovered, struggling to find the words. The dispatcher advised him to wait outside until the police arrived. Jason staggered out of the house, his mind reeling from the shock. He sat on the front steps, staring blankly at the street, trying to hold back tears. Within minutes, the wail of sirens filled the air as Boulder police arrived. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, drawn by the flashing lights, but Jason was too overwhelmed to meet their gaze. His world had been upended, leaving him to wait in anguish as the nightmare continued. The Boulder police arrived swiftly at Paul Barstow's home that night, their flashing lights and sirens piercing the quiet neighborhood and signaling to residents that something tragic had occurred. Detective Laura Reynolds, a veteran with 15 years of experience, was the first to arrive at the scene. Known for her no-nonsense demeanor and keen instincts, Reynolds immediately sensed that this was not a typical death. As she entered the house, she observed the chaos around her. The living room bore the marks of a struggle: an overturned chair, scattered papers, and a broken coffee mug creating a scene of disorder. However, it was the bedroom that confirmed Reynolds' darkest suspicions. Paul Barstow lay on the floor with a rope tightly wound around his neck. His face was pale and his eyes empty. The scene was deeply disturbing, even for someone as seasoned as Reynolds. The crime scene team swiftly began their work, photographing the room from all angles and gathering potential evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, collected samples from the rope, and carefully bagged the broken pieces of the coffee mug. Reynolds observed the position of Paul's body, noting defensive wounds on his hands and bruising around his neck and face. To Reynolds, the evidence pointed to a violent struggle, indicating that Paul had fought desperately for his life. However, not everyone on the team was convinced. As the investigation advanced, a controversy began to emerge. Some forensic experts offered alternative interpretations of the scene. Dr. Matilda Chang, a meticulous forensic pathologist, proposed that the evidence might suggest a suicide rather than a murder. She pointed out that the rope was tied in a manner that could be self-inflicted, and the disorder in the living room might have been the result of Paul's distress. Dr. Chiang explained that it wasn't unusual for individuals in deep emotional distress to stage scenes before ending their own lives. This disagreement among experts led to tension within the investigation. Detective Reynolds and her team remained convinced that Paul had been murdered, likely during a violent struggle. On the other side, Dr. Chiang and her supporters pushed for a more nuanced view, suggesting that suicide could not be ruled out. This disagreement slowed the investigation, as the team had to explore both theories and scrutinize every piece of evidence from various perspectives. As the days went by, the pressure on the Boulder Police Department intensified. The media quickly picked up on the conflicting theories, with local outlets such as the Denver Post, known for its incisive investigations, publishing articles questioning whether the police were following the right leads. This controversy only compounded the distress for Paul's family, who were eager for answers. They wanted to understand the true nature of their loved one's death and pressed the police to uncover the truth, whether it was murder or suicide. Angelica Barstow quickly became a key person of interest in the investigation. At 34, she was known in Boulder for her eccentric personality. She ran a popular YouTube channel called Fairyworks, where she shared videos about her experiences with fairies and other spiritual entities. Her channel had attracted significant attention, but often for negative reasons. Thousands of viewers left hateful comments, accusing her of lying and claiming that her content was fake. By June 2017, the constant barrage of negativity had started to severely impact Angelica's mental health. Angelica's marriage to Jason Barstow, Paul's younger brother, had been troubled for years. Friends and neighbors observed their frequent public disputes, with Angelica often lashing out at Jason. In one particularly shocking incident, she forced him to strip in public and humiliate himself, shouting at him to declare that he was a loser. These incidents suggested that Angelica might have been nearing a breakdown. The police were aware of these issues as they started their investigation. Detective Laura Reynolds, leading the case, concentrated on uncovering any potential motive Angelica might have had. It was well known that Angelica felt trapped in her marriage, and her affair with Paul had offered her a sense of escape. Their relationship had been intense and covert, with several sexually explicit texts discovered on Paul's phone. As Paul started to distance himself, possibly due to mounting tension and fear, Angelica's feelings of desperation and betrayal may have intensified. During her interrogation, Angelica remained calm and somewhat detached. She acknowledged the affair but firmly denied any involvement in Paul's death. "The fairies told me he was pulling away," she told Detective Reynolds. "But Lady Luna Lovegood is my witness. I would never hurt him." "I loved him," Angelica insisted. However, her demeanor struck Reynolds as peculiar, too composed for someone in her situation. Detective Reynolds observed that Angelica's eyes flickered around the room whenever questioned about her relationship with Paul, as if she were searching for the right answer. As the interrogation progressed, Angelica's agitation became more apparent. While she continued to deny any involvement in Paul's death, she struggled to account for her whereabouts on the night of the murder. Her alibi was vague. And when pressed for more details, she grew defensive. "I don't have to tell you everything the fairies will," she snapped, her voice rising. The police noted Angelica's behavior, which only heightened their suspicions. Despite her denials, the evidence against her remained circumstantial. The texts confirmed the affair, but they did not directly link her to Paul's murder. Despite the lack of direct evidence, Angelica's unstable behavior and marital tension made her a primary suspect. Detective Reynolds and her team remained vigilant, watching for any misstep that could shed light on her role in Paul's death. The next suspect on their list was Jason Barstow, Paul's younger brother and Angelica's husband. Jason, 29, was known in Boulder as a charming but directionless individual. He had moved from job to job without settling into a stable career. While his easygoing nature made him popular, it also led to frequent arguments with Angelica, who was frustrated by his lack of ambition. Jason's relationship with Paul was strained, not only because of the affair with Angelica, but also due to the deep-seated envy he felt towards his older brother's success and stability. The police were aware of this sibling rivalry as they began questioning Jason. Detective Laura Reynolds, leading the investigation, found Jason to be cooperative but noticeably nervous. When questioned about his whereabouts on the night of Paul's death, Jason claimed he had been at a local bar, the Sink, watching the Rockies game and socializing with friends. However, his alibi fell apart when the police found that the bartender didn't recall seeing Jason that night, and none of the regular patrons could confirm his presence. Jason's inconsistencies fueled the police's suspicions, but there was additional context to consider. The tension in his marriage to Angelica was well known. Friends observed how Jason would often avoid confrontations with his wife, retreating into his easygoing demeanor whenever conflicts arose. Beneath his easygoing exterior, Jason harbored growing resentment towards Paul's long-term affair with Angelica. Paul had what Jason desired: a successful career, a stable life, and for a time a sexual relationship with Jason's wife. During his interrogation, Jason attempted to downplay the affair's impact on him. "Yeah, I was mad," Jason admitted to Detective Reynolds, "but I wasn't going to do anything about it. Paul's my brother. We had our differences, but I'd never hurt him." While his voice was steady, Reynolds observed that Jason's hands fidgeted constantly, betraying his underlying unease. The police pressed Jason about his relationship with Angelica, specifically the public arguments neighbors had witnessed. Jason shrugged it off, saying, "Angelica's got a temper, but it's nothing serious. We argue. Then we bleep each other until we faint. But who doesn't?" Jason added, trying to downplay the tension. Still, his efforts to minimize the conflict didn't convince the detectives. Reynolds noted his evasiveness, particularly how he avoided eye contact when questioned about the night of Paul's murder. Despite inconsistencies in his story, there was no concrete evidence directly linking Jason to the crime. Although his motive, anger and jealousy, was evident, the lack of solid proof prevented the police from formally accusing him. Nonetheless, Jason remained under close scrutiny, with Detective Reynolds and her team closely monitoring his every move as the investigation progressed. The final suspect in the investigation was Linda Barstow, Paul's ex-wife. At 48, Linda was known for her fiercely protective nature, particularly regarding her two children, Ward and Salter. Her controlling tendencies had caused friction within the extended Barstow family for years. Linda and Paul had divorced amicably on the surface, but there was underlying tension. Despite their separation, Linda never completely relinquished her influence over Paul's life. She frequently meddled in his affairs and showed up unannounced at his home. Her ongoing involvement was a sore spot, especially given her history of favoring Paul's younger brother, Jason. Linda's blatant favoritism towards Jason had fueled resentment between the brothers, but she appeared indifferent to the impact it had on their relationship. In fact, she had been particularly close to Jason, even engaging in a brief affair with him when he was barely 18. This past affair was a poorly kept secret and added a deeply uncomfortable layer to the already strained family dynamics. When the police brought Linda in for questioning, she was composed but defensive. Detective Laura Reynolds led the interrogation, focusing on Linda's relationship with Paul in the months before his death. Linda insisted she had moved on from their marriage and that their interactions were solely for co-parenting purposes. "I was over the bleep a long time ago," she stated firmly. Our focus was on Ward and Salter. Nothing more, however. Detective Reynolds wasn't convinced. Linda had a history of interfering in Paul's life, and there were rumors she disapproved of his affair with Angelica. Friends of Linda told the police she had openly expressed disdain for Angelica, considering her unfit to be part of the family. When Linda learned of Paul's death, she quickly pointed the finger at Angelica, telling detectives she had always suspected Angelica was troubled. During her interrogation, Linda maintained her innocence, but couldn't conceal her animosity toward Angelica. She was never good enough for Paul, and I told him that. Linda confessed. Linda was adamant about her strong feelings, saying, "I didn't want her anywhere near my kids." Despite her intense emotions, she denied any involvement in Paul's death, claiming she would never harm him due to the impact it would have on their children. The police were left with a puzzle to solve. Linda had both motive and opportunity, her protectiveness over her children and resentment toward Angelica. However, like Jason, there was no concrete evidence linking her to the crime. Her strong personality and controlling nature made her a person of interest, but the investigation continued without a definitive lead. Without concrete proof, the detectives couldn't move forward with an arrest. The investigation continued as they sought the truth behind Paul's tragic death. Then, on July 12, 2017, a new piece of evidence emerged that shifted the direction of the case. That morning, the weather in Boulder was warm and sunny, typical for early summer. A neighbor, out for a walk with her dog named Mary Sinclair Varlets, noticed something unusual in the Barstow's trash can, which had been left by the curb. Curious, she peeked inside and saw what looked like a torn piece of fabric stained with blood. Shocked by what she saw, she called the police right away. Detective Laura Reynolds and her team arrived quickly. They collected a piece of fabric, identified as part of a shirt with frayed edges, and confirmed it was soaked in Paul Barstow's blood. This find was important. It went against the idea of suicide and suggested a violent struggle instead. The shirt's DNA matched the evidence found around Paul's neck, making it crucial for the investigation. Forensic experts were brought in to examine the rope and bloodstains in detail. They also searched Barstow's trash can for additional clues but found nothing notable. Despite this, the discovery of the rope was enough to restart the investigation. Detective Reynolds felt a new sense of urgency. She knew this discovery altered everything. With the fresh evidence, the detectives went back to re-evaluate their list of suspects. Here's a rewritten version of the script with simpler language and a unique touch. The t-shirt fragment seemed to have been thrown away quickly, possibly by someone who had easy access to the Barstow house. The timing of the trash removal hinted that the killer was familiar with the family's routine. The investigators realized they needed to speak with the suspects again, focusing on where they were in the days following Paul's death and any possible link to the rope. Here's a revised version of that passage with simpler language and a unique tone. Finding the blood-stained t-shirt piece changed the course of the investigation. It gave the detectives the key evidence they needed to rule out suicide and shift their focus entirely on tracking down the killer. The quest for justice for Paul Barstow was still ongoing, but now the police had a fresh lead that could finally uncover the truth. On July 15, 2017, Detective Laura Reynolds and her team finally made significant progress in their investigation. After weeks of interviews and gathering evidence, they zeroed in on Angelica Barstow as the main suspect in the murder of Paul Barstow. Angelica, 34, was Paul's sister-in-law and had been secretly involved with him in a relationship that lasted 5 years. Her odd behavior, including a fixation on fairies she often shared on her YouTube channel, and the emotional instability she displayed, had already raised red flags with the detectives. Angelica's alibi quickly unraveled. She initially stated that she was home with her children the night Paul was killed, but neighbors reported seeing her Chevy Malibu parked near Paul's house around the time of the incident. Additionally, Angelica's unpredictable behavior and emotional flare-ups were noticed by many, including her friends and family. Her YouTube channel, Fairyworks, where she spoke about fairies as though they were real, had earned a reputation for its strange content, hinting at her fragile mental state. On the morning of June 15th, detectives showed up at Angelica's home with an arrest warrant. Angelica was sitting at her kitchen table, looking unkempt and visibly nervous, wearing only a bra. When the police informed her that she was being arrested for Paul's murder, she appeared stunned. Her face turned pale and she broke down in tears. "I didn't do it," she sobbed. "The fairies made me do it." Her strange statements about fairies only added to the detectives' concerns about her mental stability. Angelica was taken into custody, and the police carried out a detailed search of her home. They uncovered more evidence connecting her to the crime, including some of Paul's personal belongings and extra pieces of rope that matched the one found in the trash. During questioning, Angelica kept insisting that she had been controlled by fairies, a statement that seemed increasingly irrational. During her arrest, Angelica seemed confused and terrified, struggling to grasp the gravity of the situation. Her emotional outbursts and bizarre explanations only strengthened the police's suspicions of her involvement in the murder. Detective Reynolds noted that the arrest was a pivotal moment in the investigation. Angelica Barstow's arrest sent shockwaves through Boulder. The community was astonished that someone who appeared to be a devoted mother and wife could be implicated in such a grave crime. As the investigation progressed, attention turned to uncovering Angelica's motives and assessing her mental state, while more details about her role in Paul's murder came to light. The trial of Angelica Barstow started on August 7, 2018, at Boulder County Court. The atmosphere in the courtroom was charged as people came to witness the pursuit of justice for Paul Barstow. The case had drawn media interest, with local news outlets closely tracking every new development. Angelica's trial was characterized by strong emotions and dramatic moments in the courtroom. The prosecution, headed by District Attorney Rachel Stone, contended that Angelica had premeditated and executed Paul's murder. Stone, a 42-year-old attorney renowned for her firm approach to violent crimes, presented a detailed case outlining Angelica's motive. Stone argued that Angelica's jealousy and unstable mental state drove her to commit the brutal murder of her brother-in-law. She emphasized the affair between Angelica and Paul, along with her erratic behavior and strange claims about fairies influencing her actions. In contrast, the defense, led by 50-year-old attorney Harold Green, presented a different perspective. Green argued that Angelica was suffering from severe mental illness and could not be held fully accountable for her actions. He claimed that Angelica was experiencing a psychological breakdown at the time of the crime. Green presented evidence of her ongoing mental health issues, including her fixation on fairies and her erratic behavior, to support the argument that she was not in a sound state of mind when the murder took place. Throughout the trial, Paul's family attended daily, their faces reflecting deep sadness. They listened as the details of Paul's murder were revealed, including evidence such as the bloody rope and Angelica's troubled history. The emotional impact on the family was palpable as they heard about the affair and Angelica's bizarre claims about fairies. After several days of testimony and closing arguments, the jury deliberated and delivered their verdict on August 14, 2018. Angelica Barstow was found guilty of first-degree murder. Paul's family reacted with a mixture of relief and sorrow, feeling that justice had been achieved while continuing to mourn their loss. On August 21, 2018, Angelica was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's decision underscored the gravity of her crime and its impact on Paul's family. While many viewed the sentence as a just punishment, some debated whether it was too severe, considering Angelica's mental health issues. For Paul's family and friends, the trial and sentencing provided a measure of closure but could not erase the pain of their loss. The case remained a somber reminder of the complexities and consequences of personal relationships. While life in Boulder began to return to normal after Angelica Barstow's conviction and sentencing, the effects of the case continued to resonate with those involved. Angelica Barstow was transferred to the Colorado Department of Corrections to serve her life sentence without the possibility of parole. Her time in prison involved continuous psychological evaluations to manage her mental health issues. Although her specific location within the prison system was kept confidential for security reasons, it was known that she received regular counseling and medical care. Angelica's claims of being influenced by fairies continued to be a point of discussion both among inmates and in media reports. Meanwhile, Jason Barstow, Angelica's husband, faced a challenging journey ahead. At 29 years old, he had to find a way to rebuild his life in the wake of the tragedy. He focused on rebuilding his personal and professional life, striving to offer stability for his family amidst the turmoil. The scandal had impacted his reputation, making it difficult for him to secure steady employment in Boulder, where the case had been closely followed. Linda Barstow, Paul's ex-wife, also faced challenges in coping with the trial's aftermath. Her relationship with Paul's family remained tense, and her public criticism of Angelica had made her a controversial figure. Despite this, Linda stayed engaged in community activities but faced backlash for her role in the case. She concentrated on her career and personal life while managing the repercussions of the trial. Paul Barstow's family, including his 2 young children, found some degree of closure with the conclusion of the trial. They sought counseling to help manage their grief and navigate the public scrutiny surrounding the case. They kept Paul's memory alive through private gatherings and by sharing stories of his life and accomplishments. The Boulder community also came together to support and comfort Paul's family as they moved forward. In summary, the aftermath of the trial brought significant changes to the lives of those involved. The case left a lasting impact on Boulder, prompting reflection on the complexities of personal relationships and mental health. While Angelica Barstow faced the consequences of her actions, those affected by the case worked to rebuild their lives and seek a sense of normalcy. A Truthsful Crime Case solvers. Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Do you have any thoughts about this case, or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe.